Hey, if you like DIY projects and you're like me and trying to build your own home, it's probably safe to say at some point you're going to use subcontractors. Who you decide to use can really make or break your project, and I want to share with you today what I've run into when finding and hiring subcontractors. Let's first talk about our subcontractors that didn't work out so well and what techniques and methods I used to find them. Let's talk about one of the very first things that we subcontracted out. That was our concrete and foundation work. As you can see, we have a footer with a concrete wall on top of it, done by two separate contractors. The footer was poured first, and as you can see, it's very sloppy. Structurally, it's okay, but it's just not smoothed off around the edges. People were walking through it, and it was just very sloppy. And I have to work around this later because this crawl space is going to be encapsulated, and this is going to be extra work for me to try to smooth this out to make it work. So that contractor we let go and had a different one come in to pour the walls, which we had some issues with that as well. Now let's talk about how I found those contractors. We're going to call the way I found that contractor friend of a friend. Now, while you may be able to be successful using that type of method to find subcontractors, I think if you do go from a recommendation of a friend from a friend, that you should probably research their work, maybe go take a look at a project or two and see what kind of work they do. I did not do that and ultimately paid the price with sloppy work on our footer. So let's talk about another part of the project that we subcontracted out, and that is our roofing systems. The garage built last year had a contractor for that steel roofing system, and the house, which was done about a month ago, had a separate contractor for that roofing system. Two different results. The garage was kind of, I was okay with it. The house I'm really happy with. So let's review how I found both of those contractors. Probably the biggest thing that I'm not happy with on this roofing system can be found right at the peak. You can see our ridge cap trim runs across the ridge, and if you look real close at the peak, it doesn't return down the rake trim. It's cut flush with butyl tape underneath and riveted down to that trim piece. While that may be acceptable, I think over time you could run into issues with wind-driven rain getting in there after that butyl tape dries and cracks over the years. So eventually I'll put a return over that and counter flash it so it'll look nice. But looking at the house, very different look at the peak. You can see how they returned the ridge cap down over the rake trim. Maybe you have to put the fascia and soffit trim on, but that's a much better way of doing it. You're probably not going to be able to tell from this video, but the second thing that I think could have been done a little better is the closures on these ribs with the standing seam. These were cut before and trimmed before they were snapped together, and you can kind of see they're not perfect. A little bit of a gap in some of them, and I think it just boils down to technique, the way they did it. Could have been done just a little bit better. Let's look at the house. Here's a look at the house ends. Different contractor again. I think these look much better. The final thing that could have been done a little better is looking at the drip edge here under the eave. The transitions, you can see there's a little bit of a gap in some of the seams, and the way it's seamed is backwards. There's another one that shows a little bit of a gap in those seams. If you reverse that seam, it goes to the back of the house and you never see it. So again, it's just attention to detail, the way it's seamed. So you can see the opening from this end when you're walking up to the house, but if I go to the other side of it, you don't see the seam. So that seam should have been flipped. I know this drip edge is a little different. It's not the Denver style drip edge, but you can see that seam there, how nice and tight it is. And it's actually seamed the appropriate way. So there's my front door, and it's seamed the other way. So as you walk up to the front door, you can't see the seam. You have to come from this side to see it, and it's barely visible. Same way if I walk over to the other side, You walk up to the front door, you can't see that seam. It looks like one solid piece. But if I go around to the other side, right there's the seam. So you can see how it kind of disappears on the camera. And that just goes down to planning. That's a good contractor versus a okay contractor. How did I find such a good roofing contractor for our house build? Well, you may think that you need to stay up endless nights searching the internet for someone that has a 5-star review on their roofing business. Or maybe you're thinking you can go online, pay someone a hefty finder's fee, and have them find you a good contractor. While either one of those methods may work, it doesn't guarantee you success. So what's the answer? So think about this. With Swiss cheese, if you have several different slices of Swiss cheese and you put those slices together, more than likely the holes in those slices are not going to line up. That's going to prevent a bad contractor from slipping through all of your layers of defenses through those little holes in that Swiss cheese. At some point, you're going to have a slice that's going to stop that contractor from working on your project. Whatever you're hiring that subcontractor out for, either via concrete work, roofing work, framing, electrical, plumbing, you need to do your homework, and that may mean staying up all night, doing your research, doing your part, and becoming as much of an expert as you possibly can on whatever part of that project you're subbing out. Now that you've done your homework and become as much of an expert as you can on your specific part of the project that you want to subcontract out, it's time to go looking for contractors. Here's a quick look at all the roofing contractors that are close to our project. And as you can see, there's quite a few with quite a few reviews and very good ratings. This in and of itself is not enough. What you need to do is pick a few and make a phone call and find out what their expertise is in. As you can see, there's a lot of places on here that do shingles. There's some that do rubber roofs, and there's a few that do metal roofs. You need to make sure, depending on what your project is, you pick a company that has experience working with the material that you're using on your build. Hey, another great place to search for qualified candidates is Facebook groups. I bet there's probably somebody else in your area that's in your situation or was in your situation and can point you to a good contractor. You remember all those nights you stayed up researching and becoming an expert on your project? Well, now it's time to put that knowledge to use. Your preliminary search is done, and now it's time to pick, I would say, at least a minimum of 3 different companies to meet with, have them come out and look at your project and give you a written estimate on the work to be completed and the cost for such work. Now that you've met with each of the candidates, it's time to take a look at their written proposals. Once you have all the proposals in, you can kind of compare and contrast the different scopes of work to be done and the different pricing. This is our winning bid for our roofing project. As you can see, standing seam metal roof to have it installed is not cheap. We're looking at $12,873.50 to have the ice and water shield and the steel installed on our roofing system. It's expensive, but this roofing system is going to last a long time, in my opinion. So that's one important area to compare proposals in, is the cost. I typically don't go with the cheapest guy, and I typically don't go with the highest cost guy. I go somewhere in between, and I've had good luck with contractors that are kind of in between the high and low portion when it comes to price. When you're considering price, make sure the scope of work to be done, and here it's listed under the description of work to be done, that you're comparing apples to apples. Some proposals will include some things, some won't. This one doesn't include taking the garbage or the trash away at the end. Not a big deal for me, so it wasn't a deal breaker. But you look here, we're installing the panels, we're installing all the trims, the rake, eave, valley, steel, and the ridge cap. The steel is completely done as far as the roof goes. Nothing more, nothing less. The second part of our project was the high temperature ice and water shield. Not really required for this type of roof system. We have the zip sheathing, the 5/8 zip on the roof deck that has been liquid flashed and taped. So that's our last layer of defense. On top of that, we have the ice and water shield. We decided to do that over the entire roof deck. I think that's money well spent, just another layer of defense. And then you have the standing seam metal roof on top of that, which doesn't have any exposed fasteners or very minimal exposed fasteners. So I think the roofing system is very solid. But when you're looking at these proposals, make sure you're comparing apples with apples, know what you're getting for the price that you're paying. And from that, you can select a winner for your project.
Hey man, we're not done yet.
Oh, what? Oh yeah, step 5. Arguably the most important step of this whole process is monitoring the project or the work done. You're the general contractor. Make sure what's in the contract and make sure what you want is getting done on your project. It's your responsibility.
Guys, that's been my experience working with subcontractors on our project. It's been good for the most part, and I think if you follow those 5 steps, it'll help you weed out those people that you don't want working on your project. If you found this content useful, I encourage you to subscribe, hit that like button, it helps the channel out, and follow along on our build. We're getting to the point in the build where we're going to start making it pretty. Hope you stay tuned. That's all I have for you today. We'll see you in the next video.